And Paul, you might want to listen in on the very beginning of this before you, if you can, before you disappear.
Okay, great. Yeah, I'm here.
Come on. Why isn't it showing my PowerPoint?
Is that on your screen?
You have to turn your video on.
Nope, doesn't require video. It looks, let's see. Looks like it's, oh, here we go. Let me try this, blah, blah, blah. Oh, here we go. And here we go into the,
We got it.
okay, do you have it? Because it's only showing a part of the stuff for me right now.
It says Grenada J3A by Mike Shelby.
Okay, and it's showing the whole 9 yards?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah,
Okay.
it's in preview mode.
well, that's what there we go.
I remember contacting you, Mike, on this expedition.
Come on. It still won't go flip out of preview mode.
Down in the
Hit
bottom, just to the left of the
F5.
minus.
Yep.
Down the bottom
There
right,
we-
or that.
There we go. That's what the button I was trying to find. So this is a cute little program. It's a little bit of a rehash of something I did back in 2013, and about Grenada. And we're going to talk a little bit about contesting, DXing, and all the stuff that goes along with that. So we're going to take you on a little bit of an expedition, so you get to tag along with me. And believe me, when you get a chance to get off the local shores here, or even if you do it within the state, or if you do it internationally, being on an expedition is an absolute blast. And there is so much that you're going to learn, both from your friends, and you're going to learn a lot about yourself. So one of the really neat expeditions out there that was world-class was Scarborough Reef. This is a set of rocks out in the China Sea that just sticks up in the water. So can you imagine being out there on a rock like this, where you can barely see the next rock over to see where someone else is set up out there? But can you imagine this at nighttime when the light is out, everything's pitch black, all you have is this little bit of water lapping at your feet there, and you're out there trying to do work DX on that.
A couple of rocks out in the ocean off the coast of China. Some guys set up stations. So they can
Good
contact.
Lord.
Ain't that cool? Or how'd you like to be down in Antarctica beyond Peter First? That island there, I think it's only been activated a couple times, but in order to get on that island, you have to use a helicopter. They have about a 200-foot cliff that wraps all the way around that. The last time that was activated, when they were pulling all the equipment off the island, they of course have to use a helicopter. Helicopter is limited in what kind of environment. You get too much wind out there and those things get grounded. So they were just about ready to pull the last few boxes of stuff off of there and the last bit of crew, and the wind picked up and shut down the helicopters. The guys had to overnight it out there with minimum supplies and minimum coverage overnight before the next, I think it was mid next morning before they could get them off the island. Or you could be over at Tonga in the South Pacific and enjoying a very, very tropical area. You could be stuck out on an atoll out in the middle of the Pacific, just a bunch of sand out there, and a bunch of tons and tons of birds and whatever else kinds of animals out there. Or you could be doing an expedition out there. Or Wake Island actually has a little bit of a community wrapped around it, and it's a pretty good size operation. So one of the interesting things always is when getting to your destination for your DXpedition, you just never know what you're going to end up having to take. So this is down in Africa, trying to get across a river and some mud flats, trying to get our vehicles over there so we could take and continue on down the road. Or you may end up in a place where there is only little tiny canals, no roads, and you end up having to use dugout canoes and some polers, rent some local people to take you get you back into the area that you need to get back into to do your operations. So travel is always so much fun on these things. So the expedition contesting travel is. So right now, COVID's starting to tame down a little bit. We have things that are happening that are now letting us to take and travel within our country and also international. So this whole process is opening up here. And it's kind of interesting is that when even with COVID going on, you still had probably about 20 expeditions a month going on. As this opens up, typically when we get into the roll of things, like during this winter, we have good old Solar Cycle 25 that is starting up, and it is really doing pretty darn good. And these expeditions are going to really, really take off. I mean, some of the ones that actually down at Swaziland, that's an encapsulated country that's inside South Africa. And there is right now 3 expeditions going on in Swaziland down there. So out of the Russian expedition, I have those guys captured, I know on 4, and I think I got 5 different bands on the Russian expeditions. The other 2 expeditions, I think I have probably about 3 bands connected out there. So there's just all kinds of expeditions that are getting planned and getting funding and going off and doing it. Some of these expeditions are some of these multi-million-dollar expeditions. Some of these is a group of guys, 3 or 4 or 5 guys that get together and buy some tickets to some odd weird place, and they go off and set things up and do an expedition there. Ghana has been on the air for this last week, and I just on 40 meters and 80 meters, I've been able to work Ghana. That's over in Central West Africa there. So this stuff is really starting to get going now. So this little expedition that we did down in Grenada, and that's a small island about 1,500 miles south of Miami. It's one of the last islands in the Caribbean chain there, and it's very close to Venezuela and Trinidad and Tobago. So there it shows a map down the right-hand corner where Grenada is. That's the guy in orange and red there. So the first time I did 2 expeditions down there. The first time, this is the group of guys that we had here. We had 5 guys in there. One guy had Terry down at the bottom there, had been there before, so we knew how to get around. The rest of us, that was the first time we had ever gone down to Grenada, so we did not know what to expect. We all learned real quick. So there's a picture of us. The 4 of us there, you can see me in the middle there. Clarence on the right, Mike on the left of me, Vince on the further left. And Terry over on the right. We have never met Terry. We didn't know what he looked like. All he did was just lay his magazine, his CQ magazine out on the table, and we knew exactly who he was. And like any ham radio group, he blended in just like he was part of the big family. So Grenada has been, they've had expeditions going down there the last 40 years. Always something. It has a long history about that. The call sign that we use is J6 Alpha. That still doesn't seem right. I'll think of that correctly in just a moment. But Gil was our host down there, so we kind of stayed at his place, or the operations was at his place. All this equipment had been stored at his QTH. We hired another guy called Dexter. He helped us do the assembly, getting the equipment out, getting antennas strong, getting things up and going. Gil's place was up on top of a hill at about 500 feet above sea level. So it had beautiful, great coverage of everything. The only bad thing was just over the backside of the hill, there was an AM broadcast station that also created some unknown problems for us. The really cool thing is this QTH is located next to the equator. So you had excellent coverage, you had plenty of heating for the ionosphere, good heating for the ionosphere. We had great coverage into Europe, you had great coverage into the Americas, you had great coverage into South America, and super coverage into Africa. Africa has always been my nemesis on trying to get good coverage in there. But you don't have many people that actually operate there. So overall, fairly easy to get in there from the States. So we were down there for the purpose of working the CQ Worldwide Single Sideband Contest. That was our goal. So
Hey, Mike, could you
Yeah.
remind us what time of year this is?
this is October. CQ
Okay.
Worldwide, as was just discussed, is coming up the weekend after next. If you want to work, this is CQ Worldwide Single Sideband is the #1 worldwide contest. It's worldwide. Every year I'm in there, and I typically pick up 1, 2, or 3 new countries every year that I participate. So this is really, really important for me as a DXer to add to my DXCC list.
Thank you.
So got that?
Yep.
Oh, okay, so when we got down there, we have lots of bits and pieces of antennas and stuff like that. Remember, this is a area that lives on the coast, lots of salt water. So anything that is aluminum corrodes, and it's a disaster. So the first thing is taking things apart, cleaning everything up, trying to figure out operating positions, getting all of our equipment in the right places. The Gil, the guy that was hosting us there, he knew what we were trying to do, so he could help us out with all the planning on how to set things up. Really important. So this is our place up on top of the hill. This is our view looking west. Below us there is the town of St. George, and that's the capital. So, you know, I'm debating, is that a $1 million or $2 million view up there? Really incredibly good. So just as a quick rundown, Grenada is known as a spice island. It's a volcanic, very rugged tropical island. You know, temperature averages about, because it's next to the equator, about 82 degrees, 80% humidity or better, 110,000 population. You drive on the left side of the road. So when we got down there, it's like everybody looked at me. And so I was the designated driver because I have no problems in driving on the left-hand side of the road. In fact, I have more problems when I come back to the States remembering how to drive on the right side of the road. And okay, so that's enough of that stuff. So it's a French colony. I'm going to skip through this stuff here. Soviets came in there and helped out a whole bunch of stuff. There was a big queue, a bunch of changes in government. We went in there and invaded them one time to try and put things back at a normal democratic society there. And all the, when they had the big coup, you still had, in this one place in this old fort, you still have the holes in the wall where they executed the prime minister and all the top brass of the country there. You could still see that. So, and China provided about $40 million and about 300 laborers to rebuild and repair the big national stadium. So they had this huge world cricket match down there. So the really cute thing about that, during the opening ceremonies, they played the Taiwan anthem. And you can imagine how well that went over rather than the Chinese anthem when their Chinese players came out. So that went over real well. So this was a 9-day trip, took a red eye out of Portland to Miami, then caught the afternoon flight down to Grenada. That time they were only running like 3 flights a week out of there. So you had to time things right. So first 2 days was set up, and we needed every bit of that time for setup. Then you have 2 solid days of operations, 24 hours. So it's a absolutely hard grind getting through the full 48 hours. And we tried rotating up people as quick as we possibly can. And 1 day of tear down, cleanup. We spent another 2 days down there just acting as normal ham radio operators. And I'll tell you what, you just bring up a Grenada call sign there and you get buried, absolutely buried in people coming back at you. So it was really pretty challenging sometimes just trying to carry on normal QSOs with people, because once they figured out who you were, it was a big deal. And then 1 day getting back home. So, let's see, the same thing. So anyway, this is a copy of my license for operating down there. You do need to get you can't use your call sign because it's a foreign entity. You need to get a reciprocal license. So that's what it looks like there. This is a QSL card that I put together for us while we were down there. Actually, this was for me. This was for my own personal contacts. So the call sign that we used while we were down there in the contesting was J3 Alpha. And J3 Alpha, that has a huge amount of history to that call sign. It goes back more than 20 years. And so that is if you know who to talk to and get your permission to use that call sign, it brings along a lot of history that a lot of old hams recognize. And those old hams are all around the world there. So anyway, from my operating position, this is what I got to see there. Pretty hard, huh? So this is me talking to Dexter. He was our helping hand. Mike, we were discussing something about some antenna strategy, and guess who's doing all the talking? No surprise there. Dexter up on the antenna. We had to bring this whole dumb thing down, and all the bearings and everything was all jammed up on the slider that slides up and down. So it was a real task to get the thing down. And so this is us tearing it apart and rebuilding it, cleaning up all the connections on it. That's Gil right there. That's the guy that owns this place and that was hosting us. So this here, the crow's nest up above here, we had one operator position there. And then down below, we had another operator position there. And I'm working on a balun here that was not behaving itself. And come to find out, it was not the balun being the problem. It was that AM station that was not, or just over the hill from us. I mentioned all of our equipment had been stored down there. So we had a ton of amps. As we worked through those, virtually none of those amps worked. We only found a couple of amps that actually worked. Big disappointment. Now, the interesting thing, I came down the year after that with a whole different group of guys. I came down 3 days early to try and get these amps working. The guys kept telling me that there were a whole bunch of tubes that were stored down there, that if I had 2 problems, I could fix it. Well, I unwrapped all those tubes, and virtually 90% of all those tubes, the plates had holes burnt through them, or the plates and everything was all crumpled up on the inside. They were gassy. They were absolutely worthless tubes. So we did not have very good luck getting our amps working that following year. So that's just Vince working with one of the amps. Here's Vince with the, you're in a tropical environment. So, and sometimes it's so hot down there that shirts were kind of optional, but I didn't want to show you that. This is downstairs. That's Mike working, that's Terry working. I'm working away, pounding away. So it was an incredible experience to see the entire 20-meter band light up when that contest is going on and you're down in that kind of an area where you're seeing everything coming in from the world. That band, 20 meters, it's a fair sized band, but I mean, there were like 5 to 10 queues deep where people, you could have horrible time pulling people out, trying to get your own frequency to call CQ and to try and work around all the QRM and QRN down there. It was just horrible on 20 meters to try and figure out who was really calling you. 10 meters. 10 meters is a gigantic, a huge band, huge band. So anybody that's spending any time on 10 meters, and also this was in the middle of kind of the height of good propagation. But can you imagine from end to end, people stacked up all the way across that entire 10-meter band? It was incredible. So we were knocking down about 200 queues an hour. Plan on rotating people every 2 hours, but we found we had to back off to rotating people every 1 hour because they would get burnt out. And you know what happens is you have problems hearing call signs, you have problems with the entering the call signs, things get a little confusing, and your mind just gets worn out and you need to take a break. So we moved over to rotating people once an hour there. So it's a quick learning process. You slap someone that has only maybe worked and done the 7QP contest as far as sorting out call signs, and you drop someone in there like me that had never done any of this high-end type of stuff. Whoa, you learn how to act fast, manage people, and manage what's going on in front of you. Both the Italians and Spanish are the most aggressive people out there. And, you know, when you're trying to ferret out like, hey, I only want the OHs out there or the OSs out there. And then you have the Spanish guys trying to jam their in there. It says, we're not going to go any further until we finish this queue with the OS. And so you work that queue, and then you have these guys just piling on top of each other. And then it takes you another 3 minutes to sort everything out to get down to who you want to talk to. Really challenging, really challenging. And you got to be a real hard ass to take and work through some of this stuff, because those Spaniards and Italian people just are not going to cut you any slack whatsoever. So back to Paul's point, understanding the contest rules. So when you start thinking about a contest, you really need to go back to those contest rules. This is the key to help you to start working on a strategy. So at the end of the contest, the only thing that matters is your contest score. That's what you're going for. That's what you're striving for. That's what you're going to give, do or work to try and optimize what's going on. So you got to build a strategy that's going to maximize your final scores. So Paul, what's the big thing that maximizes your scores? One of the things you always want to go to.
Yeah, so thanks, Mike. We focused on diversity. I stayed focused on 20 meters. Several folks stayed focused on CW on multiple bands.
Let me go at it this way. Multipliers.
Ah, yes.
Multipliers. That's
yes.
That's what everybody wants to go after, is get
yes.
those multipliers.
Yep.
Okay, so one of the things, if you back off to a CQDX zone map, a map of the world showing all the zones, you notice the first thing you notice is North America. That's 5 zones. there's enough population in those zones and you're close enough to that, you're going to work all 5 zones just by accident. You don't have to do anything meaningful. Matter of fact, where we were down in the Caribbean, I always kept my beam broadside to North America, because I did not want those to listen to those guys. I could tune them out, keeping them broadside. My focus was trying to work through Africa, trying to work through Europe, trying to get into India and get into those places there. So I did not want to listen one bit to North America, because I'm going to pick those multipliers up easily without doing any work. So that's one of the things that we kind of strategized on that. Time-wise, we in the early morning as sunrise was coming up, everything was always focused on Europe. We worked Europe until late in the evening, and then we kind of swung down south. We started working all of South America and cleaning everything that up. As the sun moved over to the Pacific, then we flipped everything around to the Pacific. We worked our 300,000 JAs and picked up all the Asian and Pacific, South Pacific countries. So we kind of had a focus on how we were going to work on. The other thing is thinking about bands. 40 meters does work very nicely during the daytime, but 80 meters at nighttime, that really comes alive to work a fair amount of DX on that. And people don't realize late in the evening, like right now where we are in North America, if you wait till around about 10:30, Africa will start coming in. And between midnight and 1:30 in the morning, I have managed to go through there and clean out all of those Western countries in Central Africa. And you just have on 80 meters. And also done a darn good job on 160 meters doing the same thing. So you kind of learn this by experience to know what time of day, where you're going to have the coverage, what bands you need to be on, and what your strategy is going on. So here's another one that got us. We're down at the equator. All of a sudden, the guys on 40 meters say that 40 meters just went dead. Then about 45 minutes later, guy said 20 meters went dead. And so everybody's standing around saying, what the heck's going on? What's happening? So I whip out my little smartphone, take a look at solar, one of the websites that show what's going on with the ionosphere. And sure enough, I take a look at D-layer absorption. D-layer absorption means we were down in the tropics there, get an inordinate amount of sun energy. When it gets too much, basically it starts shutting down good old 80 meters, 40 meters. And if it gets more saturated, it'll get up into 20 meters. I said, no, it looks like looking at see how things are traveling, it's going to be closed down for the next hour and 15 minutes. And so guys took off and got something to eat and got a little bit of rest, came back. And I said, just about time for it to start waking up. Sure enough, probably about within 10 minutes, 20 meters came back online, just as prediction. But having to understand the science of what goes on in the geographical area as far as what's going on with the ionosphere is really important to know that. So, and then also, Paul, the other strategies as far as what people are going for, I took our log both for this expedition and also the next expedition, and I went back through and did some calculations in a spreadsheet to figure out how much things contributed for doing hunt and pounce or just calling CQ. And I found that for the total score, calling CQ was slightly better than hunt and pounce. But hunt and pounce, there you could target those multipliers that you needed. And those are the things that really help build that entire score. Granted, you don't have as many contacts, but score-wise, that's the thing that really ends up adding to that score.
I agree.
Okay, now this is just all a bunch of stuff on scoring or what goes on. We don't care about that. Anyway, this is what our score looked at for that 48 hours there. It was an okay score. But all of us had a lot to learn, and also we needed some better equipment and more equipment to make things work right. We really needed another operator, and we needed a couple more stations there. So this is our CQ Worldwide first place for Grenada down there. This is the pool there at the place we stayed at, and right behind the white fence in the back is a white sandy beach and the ocean out there. Not bad living. So problems. I mean, unfortunately, so much of this equipment was already down there, and we had only allocated 2 days to get all of this stuff working. And there was so much stuff that just didn't work that you really needed about 4 days worth of work to get things going. When you're in a contest, things will always die. They'll get burned up. Oh, one of the things that I've learned is that good hardcore contesters, they never look at the amp and never watch dials to see if they're getting into trouble. I had to several times stop operators to say, retune. Let's, both the amp and also the antenna tuner, because you're driving too much grid current. Grid current's going to end up killing those things. And but you gotta have someone, a technical person, running around looking after everything. And also, as things burn up and break down, someone that can pick it up real fast and swap in a new piece of equipment and go off and troubleshoot the broken piece of equipment. So there's other support needs that really needs to be there. Also, having someone that brings food and snacks to you really helps out a lot too. The other thing that kind of hurt us was the last day. Well, that screwed that one up to the very bottom. So the last day of setup, it rained most of the day. So we were out there working, stopping wet most of the day. Now it's nice that the rain was nice and warm. That's the nice thing about working down there in the tropics. We had internet problems, no surprise there. That's no big deal. Guys that bring laptops down, that time Vista was still alive. That's a killer, doesn't work. Delayer absorption problems, shut down, yep, okay. Okay, fun things. Red eye flight down, not fun. No, TSA and customs, I got snagged both times going through TSA, and that was a big pain in the backside on that. First time we went down there, the hotel that we booked when we got down there had gone out of business, all locked up. So here we are at nighttime trying to find another place to stay. It worked out really, really well. 2 days of stressful setup. More time needed to be set aside for that. When you're contesting, you've got to be wet rested. You've got to be in good physical and mental shape to endure that long, hard contesting. It is tough, both physically and mentally, to work a contest like that. Of course, teardown was easy. 2 days of sightseeing and operating as ham radio, that was so nice down there. That was the plus side. So if anybody ever goes to a rare place, make sure that at the end of that, when you're out of the big rush of doing all the contesting, you set aside the time to do some sightseeing and to do some casual sightseeing. So the big three question, was it worth the expense? I think I spent about $2,500 for that trip. It's probably about $3,500 these days. Expense was well worth it. it was learned so much, had such a great time. And even with all the aggravations, it was 11 out of 10 stars. Did I learn a lot about contesting? Immense amount of knowledge. I learned so much about that stuff. And it is so important to get baptized in something like that, because you will come out of that so much better as a contester than you ever thought you were before. You may have thought you were a hot shot before. Get baptized in that and see what it's like. Would I do it again? In a heartbeat. So Solar Cycle 25, it's starting to come up. It's actually sounding a little bit better than what we had kind of previously predicted. Band conditions are improving. I think by now everybody knows that 15 has been quite regularly open. 15 has been a very, very nice band. But the cool thing, we have had some really nice openings both on 12 and 10 meters. Today, both 10 and 12 were really open, mostly through the US, a little bit offshore stuff, not a whole lot. But one of the areas that I'm missing my getting worked all states is I don't have worked all states on 12 and 15 yet. But I'll tell you, the last 3 days, I made big inroads where I'm getting down closer to the finish line. So it's doing really good. Also, I've been going back and working more on finishing up DXCC, like on 17 and 12 and 80 meters. So I'm going back and trying to add to my DXCC to get 100 different countries on each one of those bands. So propagation has been doing very, very nicely. In the morning time, 20 meters, you can work all over Europe. Very, very wide open, very accessible. So one of the things I really suggest is getting out there, doing a little Google searching, look at contests, look at expeditions, put some of those into your calendar, go out and do some of those. Like the weekend after next, we have the CQ Worldwide Contest. That's October 30th. Take a look at, do a Google search on that and get involved in that. It is so much fun. And you get to hear and see what it looks like to do international type of work. And like I mentioned before, that contest is always adding to my DXCC as far as new international entities adding to it. Another one that's coming up. Remember last year, Beauvais Island? So it's the second most wanted. This is an island that's down in sub-Antarctic. It's a volcanic island. In 1920, this year, in November, December, in 22, and in 23, there are 3 expeditions planned to go to Beauvais Island. And anybody that's a serious ham knows Beauvais is a cherished call sign that everybody wants to get a confirmation in their book. So last year, they attempted to get to Beauvais, but they didn't leave South America until March. Nobody in their right mind ventures down in Antarctica in March. That's when the weather is turning, it's getting terrible, it's raunchy. They got down there and they had boat problems. They had problems with both the weather and machinery on their boat, and they couldn't make it. They had to take and ditch it, the expedition, and they tried getting back to South America, except the water current was so bad they couldn't make any headway. They were only making 4 knots as it was. So they had to turn around and head back up to South Africa. And a boat came down and rescued them and pulled them back up. But the weather down there was so violent. Every morning when they got up to go into the break room, they had to rearrange the furniture. They had to put the furniture back to where it was because it was so bouncy and dinged around there. And I mean, even when I was down there, we still had one crossing we did where there was a couple times I woke up at night and I was levitating a bit over the bed. Well, the bed came up and picked me up and lowered me back down again. But I took a look underneath the bed and there were straps underneath the bed so you could strap yourself into the bed if the weather really got bad. Anyway, world's worst weather is down in Antarctica. So anyway, that's the end of it all. And I really want to implore everybody to get out there, do some contesting, get on board with trying to get connected with some of these expeditions. It's a lot of fun. And you'll learn a lot about all these different countries. You'll learn a lot about the cost that goes into this kind of stuff. Just a moment. You know, like a big expedition to like Beauvais, I mean, that stuff can take, I think this next expedition is a pretty inexpensive one. They don't have all the support staff. This is a lot smaller ship and everything. And so I think the budget on that is around $300,000, but some of these more expensive ones, you know, they'll push $1 million or more. Now, remember, those individuals going on those expeditions, they have invested personally because of all the stuff they have to go through. They probably invest about $35,000 of their own money. By the time they get finished with that whole process, they're probably pushing $40,000 to $50,000 of their own money by the time they get finished with everything that has to go on in that expedition. And that's with a whole lot of DX clubs adding money, providing support. You have vendors, ICOM and Flex donating radios, amps, all this kinds of stuff. So a lot of this comes free, but the big cost is that smoke that comes out of the smokestack. Fuel is the big cost of operating that ship, the support staff on that ship to run it, all the licensing that has to go on. There's a huge cost that goes in and just getting that boat to get you down there and back. So any questions or any other observations at this time?
That was a great display of the sacrifice that goes into offshore contesting, Mike. And I remember contacting you back in Grenada years ago.
Cool. Let's see if I can stop sharing things. Yeah, it was it was a lot of fun. It was a great trip. I still remember it very vividly. And the second trip that we did down there, we had 3 guys on that group. And we didn't, you know, like you need 6 people when you do a 48-hour, a minimum of 6 people. That's a starting point. And that last trip, we only had like 4 people there. And that really hurt as far as not having the right balance of people. And 3 of those guys, those were pros. Those were serious pros. And I learned a huge amount of things from those guys. In fact, one of the guys there, he was on the second expeditions to Peter the First. And so he remembers being helicoptered over there, getting things set up, operating, and the cold and the wind and stuff like that went on. So he was a great guy to talk to and learn a lot from, just sitting there and watching him run through the queues. Anything else, guys? Anthony, it's all yours.
All right, thanks, Mike. Definitely have be dreaming of white sandy beaches and radios tonight.
You know, because there's a lot of hard work, but it is so cool being down with a bunch of good hams that they're lighthearted, funny. great stories. You know, you have common things that bond yourself, and it just, one of the things, one of the guys in there had to take a swim in St. George Harbor because his dad was one of the paratroopers that came in there to try and liberate Grenada, and he got dumped in the harbor there. So both his dad and him got a chance to swim in the same harbor. So there's always some little strange story
Cool.
like that.
Mike,
Yo,
when you mentioned comparison of search and pouncing to CQing, and your score was about equal, or at least the statistics you gathered about that. When you're when you're in a DX situation like that, how do you have time to do any searching and pouncing? Wouldn't you just be like completely consumed by pileups constantly? Yeah, you have to when you're calling CQ, and that's all you're doing.
when the band gets thinned out, that I gave a good old experience on 40 meters and 10 meters. Let's see, actually 10 and 20 meters were the two big bread and butters. 15 would thin out. When things thin out and you're calling CQ and you're not getting much of anything because of band conditions, that's a daytime band. It's not good at night. So when it's marginal, either beginning of daylight or into daylight, things thin out. So it's like, okay, well, there's other guys also out there calling CQ too. And if you just put blinders on there and just always calling CQ and you never try any hunt and pounce, there are always stuff that you can clean up out there and use to add to your score. Kind of get what I'm talking about there. If you got if you got a pile up where you got 10 people deep, jumping on you, then you're going to work whatever gets thrown at you.
Right. No, I've had good luck searching and pouncing. When things are going well and you're being heard, that's the key. What I found was if you're heard, you can really clean up just searching and pouncing, because you could jump from, when there are a lot of people out there calling CQ and you're just jumping from one station to the next, and you're making QSO with everybody, and you go from one end of the band to the other and maybe back again, then it does work. But if you're for some reason you're a weak signal and you're not heard well, and there's pileups going on and other people calling CQ, then you're going to have a tough time as a search and pound station to try to get through to some of those people. So I found in those cases, I was better off just calling CQ and sticking to one frequency, and then having people search for me, if they could hear me. But again, we're talking operating maybe 100 watts or less, not such great band conditions. And if you're competing with high power, good, really, big gun station, you're kind of lost. So it's a hit and miss, I think. But
Yeah.
So
Well, okay. So here's another example. Like on 15 meters, I had a 4-element 15-meter beam that I was running, and like I said, I love to take and keep it broadside to the state, so I didn't have to listen to them. And so I would like in the morning when traffic was real light, I'd get in there and I would do a little search and pounce, pick up a few people that I could hear. And the next thing I know, I'm picking up people, and then all of a sudden, even though a guy was calling the CQ and I pounced on him, I have people hijacking that frequency, wanting to talk to me because I had that J3 alpha.
Yeah, right.
And then so I would say, hey, I'm sorry, this is not my frequency. Let's, a little later on, I'll be moving up, or I'll tell them that I didn't dare tell them at this point in time I was going to move up, because if I moved and gave them a frequency, next thing I would do, I would have 50 people calling me. So, so there's times where the guy, the other guy that owned the frequency said, You can add the frequency. With that call sign, you own it. And I get slaughtered.
Yeah,
That's a good point, Mike.
it's a nice problem to have.
That's a nice problem to have. And that's not like all contests. But, my strategy a lot of times is that I'll try doing, just call them CQ, pick up whatever's out there that's not calling CQ, because I kind of figured that half the people are going to be calling CQ, half the people are going to be playing search and pounce. So you have to go between the two different processes in order to really find everybody that's on the band.
Yeah.
So I'll go for CQ until things wind down, then I'll jump off and run off and do search and pounce, pulling, that's the nice thing about the logging programs we have these days. And it shows you where the stations are that are multipliers. N1MM, having that connected to a DX cluster is so important because of the feedback that it gives you on knowing where to go to get those contacts that are going to give you the multiplier. So you're not having to decode the darn things to see if you have it in there. It's all color coded for you.
Yeah.
And then for people that are really lazy, that like FT8, you have JT Alert, where it will give you voice announcements and tell you where to go as far as if there's a multiplier that you want to go after, or a new country. And we're living in such a great world right now with all the software that we have that can take and really yield big results, big important results to us. Paul, it looks like you're ready to go to sleep.
Oh, yeah. It's late for Paul.
It's a little late out here.
So I thought this was one that might be worth you listening to.
Yeah,
because
definitely. You piqued my interest, Mike.
Because it basically works with exactly the stuff that you were talking about.
Yep.
There may be a little different shading of what I've talked about, some other ideals that we put in there, but overall, you got to have a strategy. You got to think about what you're going to do to build that score. And like what you talked about is getting people recognizing that all we need is a few more of these counties, and to take and focus in on knocking off those counties. And N1MM is a great tool to end up getting that stuff done.
No, Mike, you dealt with a macro look of what I spoke of in a micro look. Yep, absolutely.
Yep.
Same strategy.
Yep. Okay, that's all I got to say. I'll shut up, otherwise I can just go on forever.
Well, thank you, Mike. That was really informative.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So here on 40 meters, I got a ton of South African stations. I have Ghana coming through here. I got Brazil, a bunch of South America stuff, Virgin Islands, Azores, Canary Islands, Colombia, blah, blah. You kind of get that's on 40 meters. That's not even, most people don't consider 40 meters to be a DX band.
No.
But if you look at my logbook, 40 meters, it's not as good as 20, but I'll tell you, that's its next rival.
This is recent?
Right now, as I'm talking.
Okay, because the solar flux is, I mean, it's doing not fantastic at the moment, but it's in the 80s and maybe lower 90s, so that's really helping, I'm sure.
I mean, I spent all day working stuff on 12 and 10. A little bit of 15, a little bit of 17. And then this evening I moved on back up to about 30 meters and picked off a bunch of stuff. But I mean, those bands were very, very active today. Pseudo active the previous 2 days.
When are you on 40?
Right now.
Okay.
Now,
So basically what Mike's saying is shut
real
up and
time.
go work some DX.
Real time.
Yeah, go.
please.
Early morning is a parting shot here. I'm 40.
Early, no, I'm talking about right now. This stuff
Yeah.
is rolling through here. But if you want, actually 20 meters has been very productive into Europe in the morning.
Okay. Yeah, because the problem with 40 early morning, at least on the West Coast, is we get a lot of Asian shortwave broadcast stations popping up, which they're all over the band. So that's a little bit of a problem.
You need better tools.
Better what?
You need a better tool, an antenna that doesn't listen to those.
Oh yeah, right.
Okay, happy hunting, everybody.
Thanks again, Mike.
Thanks, Mike.
Have a
All
good
right,
night.
thanks,
everybody.
Mike. Thanks
Okay.
everybody else
Go
for
get some
coming
sleep.
out. And we will catch you all in about a month or so.
Okay.
Take care.
Yeah.
Take care, everybody.
Bye, Drew.